3, 2.
I got everybody pregnant with Barry Katz and semen.
I'm not comfortable with the tone this is taking.
If you're undeniable, you will not be denied.
If you want to be successful in show business, you get yourself a true white manager like Barry Katz.
Being a manager is just turning no's into yeses.
Creating holy shit moments. Undeniable.
You're fucking firing me up, Katz.
I love this man.
Is there anything else I should know?
You're on. What? Now I'm on the air.
Barry Katz,
Back in the house.
let's do this.
My guest, I'm so excited, Dr. Phil McGraw.
What's up, man? Yeah. My dad always said the more you've done in your life, the shorter your introduction should be. So I'm apparently a punk. You've been talking about me for 30 minutes. I'm apparently a punk.
I remember you saying something to me about one thing your father said that before I get into this, and I'll probably have to edit this out, but we were taking a television meeting, and you took this great meeting, and you spoke in this particular meeting so infrequently, but when you spoke, the things you said were just like so powerful. It was like these pinpoint jabs of Muhammad Ali. And I got outside and I said, Phil, and that meeting was so odd. You really didn't say much, but it seemed like it was really valuable. And you said, my dad always had an expression. He said something to the effect of, never miss an important opportunity, shut the up.
That's it. Yeah, he reminded me of that on a regular basis, as a matter of fact.
So I wanted you to, I like to start at the beginning. So like, where you grew up and what happened, everybody starts at 0, 0. The one thing I like to say all the time is, like, as a person, what's fascinating to sit across from you, you've controlled your own destiny. You're in control of your own destiny, and all through your career, which we'll talk about, you created companies or things where you were in control, and the control about everybody else around you was sort of left behind. But when you start, you're born into a family, as you interview so many people on your show, they don't have a choice of who their mother and father is, where they grow up, and they started 0, 0. So tell me about where you started, where you were, what happened, and what was the first thing that happened that let you know that you would be successful in business?
Well, it was a dark and stormy night. I was born in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere, right? Walked uphill to school. Both ways was uphill. No, I was one of 4 kids. I have 3 sisters, and my mom and dad were beyond blue collar. I mean, that was their goal in life, would be to ever get up to middle class or blue collar. But we always had a roof over our head. We always had food to eat. And being the only boy, I kind of had a probably different experience going through than my sisters did. But, my dad was a football coach. And in fact, the first time he ever had a job as head football coach, it was Veneta, Oklahoma. And kickoff was at 7:30, and I was born at 7:15 and disrupted his first ever game as head football coach.
Did he resent you forever after that?
I don't think he ever forgave me for it. I don't know whether they won or lost the game, but I was born, and he was a coach at the time. And then, we moved around a lot, actually. It was almost like a military rhythm. I went to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and 4th, 5th, and 6th in Denver, and 7, 8, 9 in Oklahoma City, and 10, 11, 12 in Kansas City. Like every 3 years we moved. So I was always kind of the new kid.
And what's interesting, I always like to talk about how, like, again, these control things, you're in a situation where you're a kid and your parents just come to you and say, we're moving. You're like, well, I like to stay here. I'm sorry, we're moving. So again, there's no control over your life at that point.
Yeah.
And so I think that has a lot in shaping somebody to want to take that point in their life where they go to the next point. So what?
Yeah, it really, when you're the new kid, you don't have those long-standing relationships and that peer group. And I know there was a point after my freshman year when my dad had gone back and actually gone to school to become a psychologist, and he had to go to Kansas City to do his internship at Kansas City General, and he was just going to go by himself for the year and do that. But I had gotten in a little trouble and one thing and another in that last year, and he thought, you need to be with your father, not down here with all these women. So he and I went to Kansas City, and that was kind of a defining move for me, because we went to Kansas City, but nowhere in particular in Kansas City. We had nowhere to live. We had nowhere to stay. We had.
So where were you living?
Well, when we first got there, he registered in and then was gone from there. I think he had to go back to the university and finish something. And that was in the summer before I started my sophomore year. And I was homeless at that time. I mean, I was just living on the street.
Amazing.
And then we finally got the money to get a room at the YMCA in Kansas City. And I don't even think it's still there, but it was downtown Kansas City, and it was like $5 for the week. Of course, this was in like 65. It was $5 for the week. And so we stayed there for a while, and then finally we got an apartment right before school started, just a one-bedroom apartment, and but we didn't have money for deposits, so we had no utilities, so we had no electricity, and it gets dark at like 4:30, so that made for some long night. No television, no radio, no lights, no nothing. And then it got pretty cold in Kansas City as we moved on. But it took about 3 months. We finally scraped up the money for deposits for electricity, so we were able to get the electricity turned on.
And what were you doing while he was doing this stuff?
Well, I started school, high school as a sophomore. And we got an apartment right near the high school, so I was able to walk to school.
Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, now I'm trying to figure out how you did this, because I believe as a teenager you had an interest in flying planes, correct? And didn't you get a pilot's license while you were a teenager?
I did. I got it very early on.
How did you do that?
Well, when he finished his internship, then he was able to get a job, like a real job as a doctor in a practice, and he worked for a psychiatrist up there. So things changed dramatically once he got through with all of that and could get a job. He went from like $300 a month to making $25,000 a year, which back then was not that bad. And so then I was able to, do some things that it was a big difference from just a few years before.
But what's interesting is you're following him. You're left, the rest of your family's back where they were, and you're essentially, like you said, homeless. But then one of your first goals that meant something to you was flying a plane, and that's interesting.
Yeah, well, he was a pilot, and after he got through with his coaching stint, he was a tool pusher in the oil business, where he'd sell drill bits and stuff. And when we lived in Denver, all the drilling that was going on in the Rocky Mountains, if a drill bit would break, you had to get one up there right quick. And that was his job. And he was a pilot, and he would fly these drill bits into these drilling sites up in the Rocky Mountains. And I would go with him a lot. So I started.
And were they small planes?
Oh, yeah. Small single engine airplanes. So I started flying with him. And, by the time I was 10 or 11, I was pretty good behind the wheel. I never flew by myself, but always with him.
But when you were 10, he allowed you to get in the cockpit and fly the plane.
Sure. Well, but with him right there, but I made some flights where he never touched the controls. He just talked me through it after a while. So it was in my blood from very early on.
Now, thinking back when your sons were 10, would you allow them to fly a plane with you in the cockpit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. And Jay got his pilot's license his junior year in high school as well. So he's a pilot, and he doesn't, neither one of us fly much anymore, but we've done it a lot.
That's amazing. So okay, so you're now your father's doing a little bit better, but you're still not living. You're still living a humble existence. What's the next step where you feel like you want to become more of an entrepreneur or do something that where you're more in charge of things?
Well, I've always kind of figured a way to just get along on your own. And, my dad was a bad alcoholic. And when he was drinking, you get very self-reliant. I mean, you just depend on yourself to take care of things. And so I never really had much in the way of jobs after my teen years. I threw a paper route and stuff like that. I was a car hop at A&W root beer stand until they put everybody on skates. And I have the worst balance of anybody I've ever met. I have to concentrate to sit here on this couch right now without falling over.
But you're a great athlete. You play
But
tennis
not
every
balance.
day.
Yes, that's true, but not balance. I remember in high school one day we were doing trampoline in gym. We had to turn a flip. I said, you can send me to the office, go make me run a mile, do whatever you want, but I'm not breaking my neck for some idiot gym teacher. I know what I cannot do, and I cannot do that, so I didn't do it. But so that was never my long suit. But I always just kind of figured a way to do something entrepreneurial. After high school, I never really had a job. I was always doing some kind of business, some way, somewhere, and I like that better. It's
You
not
mean
for
your own?
everybody.
In other words, your own business, whatever it
Right.
was, mowing lawns or
Right,
whatever it
whatever
was.
it
You did
was.
your own thing.
Yeah.
And here you're also obviously an adult child of alcoholic parent, and you're in that situation, which is brutal because again, it's for everybody who goes through it. It's when I had a moment with a guest who was here, Neil Brennan, who's the co-creator of the Chappelle Show, and I asked him when he decided to become more entrepreneurial and prove himself. And one of the things he said, which blew me away, he said he's the youngest of 10 children, and he said his father was an alcoholic. And he said when his father was dying, he finally had the courage to go and ask his dad, "Look, Dad, it just appears like you don't love us." And his dad paused and says, "You're right, Neil. I never did love you. I never did love all of you." And that was the moment where he said, I'm going to take charge and I'm going to prove that I can do this and I don't need that. But then when I asked him, which was fascinating, I thought of this meeting you. I asked him, I said, you have so much success because of that thing that happened. That drove you to be great. That drove you to go to the next level because of the things you went through as a child. Would you trade your dad saying you love you for all the success you've had? And without missing a beat, in a second, he said, yes, I'd take love over any success. Yeah. And so as you're telling that story, I think to myself about, what you must have been going through and how you broke through. And because normally there's a tendency for a child to either drink and follow the path. Like you said, you're a pilot, your son's doing pilot stuff. Normally a parent drinks, and a lot of times it's in the genes. Was it in your genes?
Well, I think for some reason, I think people are either psychologically minded or they're not. I mean, it's just like some people have an eye for fashion or decor or something like that, and some people don't. My wife can walk in and look at a room, and she can have it looking like $1 million in no time at all. And to me, it's just, I don't know, it's just a room. I don't see it. And I think it's the same way psychologically. And for some reason, I think I've always been psychologically minded. And I know at the time I was going through that, I didn't, at the time you don't think, boy, do I have a bad deal here. It just is, it's all you know. That anonymous poem, Children Learn What They Live, is true. I never thought I had a particularly bad deal or whatever. I knew that it was different because, like, I wouldn't bring friends home because you never know what you're going to find when you open that door. And so given that, I was different in that I would go to other people's houses and it didn't appear chaotic. At my house, it was chaotic, and you never knew if he was going to be sober or drunk, and if the lights were going to be on or not on, or what. You just never know. So I knew it was different in that regard, but you just you get along. It's I never took it personally. I just knew he had a problem with that, and it just was what it was. You just deal with it and go on.
Did you ever utilize any of the skill set you have now that came naturally to you with him, and ever have a sit down with him at any moment of a solemn moment and say something that you might say to somebody today?
Well, in two ways, it's impacted me significantly. I'm very results oriented, and when I talk to people, I look, let's change what you're doing so we can change the outcomes. And I just think common sense isn't common enough anymore, and that's the approach I take. And you get that when you're poor. When you grow up poor, you're very results oriented. You always know if somebody's been poor. You think poor people say, you don't work, you don't eat. That person's never really been poor. Because a poor person would say, if you don't work and get paid today, you don't eat today. Like, if you work and get paid in 2 weeks, you won't be here in 2 weeks. You got to get paid today. I'm results oriented. You push A, you get B. You push C, you get D. And there is a direct connection between the choices you make and the consequences you get. And I learned that very early on, because this stuff about, do you get an allowance? Yeah, you get an allowance. No, you go work and bring money home so you can put it in the kitty, because collectively then we have a place to stay and we have a place to eat. So I became very results oriented, and that affects who I am today. I'm very results oriented. I totally get that. So, I think part of that is that. And then, I am a strong believer that we create our own experience. You can be a victim or not, but you create your own experience. And
what's interesting, though, you started off, you were a victim, and then you became somebody who wasn't the victim.
Yeah, and I never really felt like a victim. Because like I say, at the time, you don't know that it's any better or worse or different than anybody else.
No, but looking back now, you know.
Mm-hmm. Looking back now, but I think you have a choice. You can, that's the choice of legacy. I've chosen to carry some things forward from my father, for example, that I think were real positives. And I've left behind the things that weren't. Like, he was the hardest working guy I ever met. There's no probably, I am. I mean, we know that research-wise. And I've been real careful with my boys, because sometimes it's like, if my father is an alcoholic, so I choose not to drink, then they never see what it can do, and they're genetically predisposed to have the problem. So I've had to specifically tell them, you don't see the danger because you don't see me drink. But let me tell you, you are set up genetically to have a problem. Don't fall in that trap. So, I've had to point that out because there's been a generational skip there in terms of doing that. So
I was at a party the other day with my kids, and I'm not a big drinker. But I'm not like you. I haven't gone since high school, but, maybe there's a drink every month or 2 months or something. But my kids have never really seen me have a drink. And I went to the table where the bar area was, and there was just a cold beer, like, in the ice. And I just thought, why not? It's just one beer. And I took it out, and before it hit the table, my 8-year-old and 9-year-old ran over and grabbed the beer out and threw it in the trash and said, "Daddy, don't do it."
yeah.
And it made me feel good, because I felt that, hopefully that'll last to the next time. So keep.
Well, both of my boys drink, I can tell you. They're unafflicted by the teetotaler gene. Both of them drink. Not to excess, but they certainly know how to party.
So tell me to the next step. So what business did you start getting into where you realized that I'm never looking back, I'm never going to be homeless, I'm never not going to have money in my pocket, and I'm never going to have to be beholden to anybody else?
Well, I knew that really early on because there was a lot of chaos in my home. My mother didn't much cotton to his drinking, and so there was a lot of conflict in that regard. And like I said, I had 3 sisters, and they were wild. I mean, I think both of them got married at 14 for the first time. I mean, it's just a chaos after chaos. And so I started becoming, kind of dependent, self-reliant very early on. I remember asking my little sister one time, "Do you suppose it's possible we got mixed up at the hospital?" I mean, these people are like, they're 14 and getting married, and what? It didn't seem right to me. So I became very self-reliant.
Did that behavior, was that part of the reason why your dad wanted you to come with him? Because if your sisters were marrying at 14, that might mean that you might think, hey, it's okay to go out with 14-year-olds and hang out with 14-year-old girls. And
yeah,
so is that why they sent you there? Because they were worried about you going, and they thought they could save you and that they couldn't save them?
I think he was trying to save them from my influence by that point, because I was getting a little rowdy, so I can't blame that on them. But, one thing that I always believed is that knowledge is power, and I always saw the value of education. And again, that's something, my dad went back to school after a long time, and so I saw the value of education, and so I really threw myself into that. I didn't like school, but it was a means to an end for me.
And that education, like, were you going to school? I know you were going to school for the similar kinds of things you're working on now and that you've worked on throughout your career, but what made you decide that that was the area that you wanted to go into? Did the evidence show that you weren't really thinking anywhere in those terms? What was the first thought that came into your mind, like, hey, I'd like to do this?
I couldn't decide whether I wanted to go to medical school, law school, or into psychology. And we had a good friend that was a physician, and I spent some time with him at his office a couple of days, and immediately decided I don't want to do this. I mean, it just seemed to me like highly repetitive, and everybody was sick, and I just thought, oh my God, this would just be horrible. And so I didn't want to do that. I thought about law school and was really pulled into that. But then what I wound up doing, which I really, really enjoyed, is I went the psychology route, but then I started a company called Courtroom Sciences, Inc., CSI, before there was a CSI.
That's right.
And that was kind of the marriage of the two. That was psychology and the law. So
but where did
for over 12 years, I just practically lived in a courtroom.
But where did the idea come from of this new kind of concept for a profession? There weren't companies like this. Where did you come up with the blueprint for this idea?
There was some of that going on, but not a whole lot. When you go to school in psychology, you declare majors and stuff just like anything else, and mine was clinical, and then I also did behavioral medicine. So I kind of did 2 cores side by side. And my specialty within that was brain and central nervous system. And, if somebody gets injured and they break a hip or an arm, it's $50,000 in damages, you pay them and you go on. If somebody gets a brain injury, you're now talking a life plan. It can be millions of dollars. So they start hiring experts to testify at trial. And so I spent a lot of time testifying as an expert in cases where people would be injured and that sort of thing. And because I was a pilot, I had an interest in aviation law. And so several years at CSI, I worked on major airline crashes throughout the country. I think the first one I did was Air Florida, which was back in 1981 when they hit the 13th Street Bridge in Washington, D.C., coming out of there. And then I've worked on many since then. Delta, American,
But
TWA,
what is it
all of them.
what is it you're trying to do? Because obviously, again, you created your own company. There was no company. Might have been a few that were a little bit similar, but you created your own thing. You were the guy who owned the company. It was you, and you gained the experience through time that they would come to you because of obviously the great work you did in the beginning. So
well, it started out where I was testifying, but then the lawyers would say, you did a really good job testifying. They're going to have an expert to counter you on the other side. Can you help us design a cross-examination for that person? And I'd say, sure. And then it was like, well, and our corporate representative, he's like really nervous. Do you think you could help him to testify? And so as it kind of shifted around where I was spending more time working on the case other than testifying than I was actually testifying. And so I kind of started doing just that. I said, look, we can hire and I can prepare someone to deliver my message, and then I can help you with your problems in these other areas. And it just kind of morphed into that. And that got so busy and so demanding that I had to make a choice to shut down my practice and to shut down everything else and do just the litigation consulting, because it was taking more than 100% of my time.
an example of something like when you were hired for the airplane crash. Explain to our audience who's hiring you and what is the goal at the end of the day that they want to accomplish 100% by having you come in.
Well, you understand, when an airplane crashes, you can't hit the ground and not be in violation of regulations, because you have to keep an airplane 1,000 feet above the ground. So just by the very fact that you impact the ground, you've violated a regulation, which means they almost always point to pilot error or some kind of malfeasance by the operator, the air carrier itself. And I was a declared pilot advocate. And so I worked as a consultant to the Airline Pilots Association in Washington, D.C., and I would go in and evaluate the pilot's behavior. We get the cockpit voice recorders, which give you the last 30 minutes of the flight where you can hear what was going on. You get the flight logs, the engine instrument recorders. You find out what was going on with the airplane and the pilots, who did what to when. You get all the traffic with chatter between the tower and approach and all of that. And, somebody had to do human engineering to figure out who did what and why. Accidents don't just happen. There are accident enabling factors, and my job was to figure out what those were, look at the human engineering side of it, and present the best possible defense given the terrible outcome.
When you saw the last Denzel Washington movie, how accurate was it?
Pretty accurate. I don't know about flying an airplane upside down like that, but I know all the investigation from NTSB and all of that. It gets very intense, and there's a lot of emotion because lives are lost and injuries and money, and it's just a quagmire. Those things often last for years and years.
Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, through this work that you were doing, that you started doing full time, wasn't there some kind of situation that was your first introduction to Oprah Winfrey, where you were working on some kind of a case that she was involved in?
Yes. Oprah got sued by the beef industry, some representatives of the cattle and beef industry. What came to be known as the mad cow case, the mad cow disease. And she was sued up in Amarillo, Texas, which is cattle country. So here you've got this billionaire woman sued behind enemy lines for disparaging beef. And so I was retained as part of that defense team.
Now imagine a lot of people in Amarillo, Texas were not very happy with you because you had gone to school in Texas, correct?
Well, here's the thing. Oprah, a lot of people in Amarillo loved Oprah, but a lot of people up there were impacted by the cattle industry, obviously. I thought it was a bogus but dangerous lawsuit from the beginning. And, I worked with Oprah for a couple of years leading up to trial because we conducted mock trials, focus group research. We did all kinds of jury profiling. And we were always present at trial as well. And in fact, in that case, myself and lead counsel Chip Babcock, who's the premier First Amendment lawyer in the country, the two of us plus Oprah and a few of her key people all lived in a bed and breakfast out on the edge of Amarillo for a couple of months out there. So, I mean,
it's interesting. You can't, you don't imagine that somebody who's at the height of their career in television, you can't imagine how anybody like a sniper can just attack at any given time, and you can't ignore it, and you have to give everything you can to it. You have to give the same dedication you give to your success in business to the success in defending yourself, or else one person like a sniper in war can just take everything down. And so you can't even conceive, no one in our audience could ever conceive of Oprah taking hours upon hours of rehearsing and mock trials and things, but that's what has to happen to win.
Well, it was a dangerous case, and although I thought it was a frivolous case, it was still a dangerous case. But Oprah, I believe the way you do anything is the way you do everything, and that's true of her. She once she said, she asked me what I thought about the case from a jury standpoint, and I said I think you can win it, but it's dangerous. And she said, I've got some lawyers telling me I should settle. Certainly not Chip Babcock, but some other lawyers telling her she should settle. She said, what do you think? And I said, well, I think the line at the sue Oprah window is going to get a whole lot shorter if you stand up and say, bullshit, I'm not paying extortion money. I didn't do anything wrong here, and I'm not paying you a dime. And you fight these people to verdict, and we did, and won. And the line at the sue Oprah window got a lot shorter. I mean, people realize, you're not going to get nuisance money.
Hey everybody, it's Barry Katz, and I wanted to talk to you about Blueprint for Success. This is a community that I put together during the pandemic to help all artists of every walk of life in the entertainment business. No matter where you are in that part of this journey, it's designed to help you. There are podcasts with people that will inspire you, like Kevin Hart, Judd Apatow, Bill Burr, that you can't find anywhere else but on this program that I've interviewed, to times where we get to talk to executives in the business that you would never have access to tell you what you need to hear and to answer your questions, to all sorts of different videos and master classes designed to help you get to the promised land. That's what the Blueprint for Success is. Doesn't matter whether you want to be a stand-up comedian, a sketch performer, a podcaster, an actor, an actress, director, writer, social media person, whatever you want to be. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've had the honor and been humbled to represent people like Chappelle, Wanda Sykes, Louis C.K., Dane Cook, and probably over 20 other people who went from a studio apartment to being a multi-millionaire and a household name. And I want that for you, and I wanted to take the time with this program to be able to help you on your way there, to get there and to heighten and increase the trajectory of your career. Blueprint for Success is the way to go. I'm proud to be a part of this program, and I'd be proud to have you to be a part of it too.
And obviously she saw, like everybody else saw in the beginnings of your business when you were testifying, that you did great work, you were prepared, were goal-oriented, and she saw that in you, obviously. And was that what led to the opportunities for television?
Well, we got to know each other really well because, as I say, I worked with her for 2 years before the trial, then during the trial. And, you know, she said the day the verdict came in, we did a show that night from Amarillo that aired the next day. And that was the first time I was ever on the Oprah show, and it had nothing to do with anything other than the trial.
Had you ever been on television on any kind of a
No.
show like that before?
No.
So your first time on television, and it's the day before the trial.
No, it's
day before the verdict.
It's the day of the verdict.
Of the verdict.
The verdict
So
came in, and we went and did a show
after the verdict.
after the verdict.
And were you, I ask you this because I don't picture this as being a quality that you have, but were you anxious?
No, not in the least. It was irrelevant to me. I mean, being on some daytime television show, how irrelevant was that? I mean, I worked all day. I had never seen an episode of Oprah from start to finish in my life. I mean, I knew who she was, and then when I met her, I vastly understood why America was in love with her. She's charming and charismatic and intelligent and funny and all of those things.
But you know what's interesting? When she met you, she saw a mirror, because that's what you are.
Well, she has a way of seeing things and creating things. And that first night I was on her show, I mean, it was one of the kindest things anybody's ever said to me. She was introducing Chip, the lawyer, and this one, that one. And then she said, "Now I want to introduce you to Dr. Phil McGraw. This is the man that gave myself back to me, because I lost myself in this process, and he gave myself back to me."
Wow.
Which was a very kind thing to say. And then, the first time she had me on the show as a guest, after that, she said, "I've always promised you that if I found things that I thought were helpful and valuable, whether it was a pair of shoes or a book or a whatever, I would share it with you." And I found him, and I want to share him with you, because at a real low spot in my life, he had the strength to stand up and tell me how it was when I needed to hear it. And I want him to tell you how it is, just like he told me. So here he is, and off we went. And so it goes, the rest is history, I guess.
So when did you know that you were going to make your mark in television and your days at CSI were numbered?
Well,
what happened? Like, what was the moment that happened? Was there a show that went on and then just went crazy, and everybody was writing you, or everybody was requesting you, or what? Or somebody, Oprah called and said the ratings for this show went through the roof. Like, what was it?
Well, it had been a few months, and she called and said, a producer called from the show and said, "Oprah wanted me to call you. We're doing a show about such and such, and she wants you to come be the expert, the guest on the show." And the producer called and said that and told me when it was. And I said, "Look, I really appreciate it, but I can't do it. I'm going scuba diving." But I can give you the name of somebody that I think would do a really good job, and just, let them do it. And she kind of was real silent and said, "Well, okay." And then a little bit later, the phone rings again, and it's Oprah. She says, "You don't say no. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going scuba diving." She said, "Well, how about we wait till you get back?" And I said, "Okay, we'll do that."
The power of no.
And She was very gracious, and I came back and went and did the show, and it certainly made waves. It certainly made waves. Some people loved it, and some people were outraged by it. It was like,
What was the subject matter where they were raving, and what happened to polarize it?
well, our very first guest was a stripper.
Now you're talking about the first guest that you had when you
that
were
I
doing...
interacted with on Oprah.
Oh, okay, got it.
It was a stripper.
Uh-huh.
And it was a very nice girl, but she was a stripper. And she had written in this letter, this long letter about, I want to change my life and I want to show women to have self-respect and stand up for themselves and, be what God made them to be and blah, 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 and all of that. And I remember at the end of reading the letter, a lot of the audience was crying and clapping and all of that. And Oprah said, well, so what do you think? And I said, well, I tell you what, before you save the world, how about we just get you a job where you keep your clothes on? Let's take this a step at a time. Before you save womankind, let's just see if we can get a job where you keep your pants on.
And I'm curious, that's one of the things in that situation, like, because she's probably making probably 4 times more money than she would make in a job initially where she would get where she kept her clothes on.
Right.
How did you go through that issue when she talked about that? Like,
well, she said she wanted to change, but she wanted to change the world at the same time. And I said, well, come on, how about we get you 30 days in a job where you stay dressed, and then we can save womankind. And everybody's like, holy shit, what did he just say? I mean, that was just what I was thinking. I was just like, if you really want to do this, don't set yourself up for failure here. You're setting up all these lofty goals. That isn't going to work. Be honest with yourself. Take care of you first, then we'll go on. And I wasn't trying to be unkind. That was just the truth of it, right? And so people were like shocked. And so I come back for my second show, and the producers have told me, wow, boy, did you make waves? I mean, that was great. I mean, you made sparks. People are talking about it. But some people were really offended at your candor. And so I saw Oprah before the show, and I said, well, I understand a lot of people were really offended by my candor. What do you think? She said, turn up the heat. Turn up the heat. You were much easier on her than you were on me. She said, turn up the heat. I'll tell them it's okay. Don't worry about it. And so I just went on and did what I did.
I love that. That's like, you can tell great people when they do things like that and they support the artist. I remember when I was at Saturday Night Live and Dane Cook was hosting one of the shows, and he did the dress rehearsal, and he did a routine in the dress rehearsal, which was this like a hard R-rated routine about how he was naked, coming from the bedroom, wanted to get something to eat, and he saw the cashews on the counter, and he took a cashew and put it on his whatever, and bent it down and shot it in the air and ate it, out of the air. And I remember the censors were like going crazy. They like literally kicked in the door, yelling and screaming at me, whatever. He cannot do that. He's not going to do that. It's not going to happen. And Lorne Michaels came in probably like a half hour later when I asked him, like, what do we do? These censors, or what should we do? I feel bad, and I don't want Dane to be upset, and I want him to have a good performance. And Lorne, in his ultimate wisdom, looked at me and said, let me take care of it, Barry. You have him do whatever he needs to do. And that's the kind of great producer and great artist that helps people become what they want to be. Michael Wright from TBS, who's one of the presidents of TBS and TNT, he always said this great expression. He says, people asked him, how do you deal with artists and talent, and what's your biggest thing that you would say that you would live by, your mantra? And he said, it's very easy. You hire great people that you have confidence in, and you get the out of the way. And that's an amazing story. Well,
there'll never be everybody talks about, the new Oprah, and, she was number one forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, now I'm number one, and reporter was asking me one time, like, Dr. Phil, what's the secret to success? You've been on the air so long, and then you become number one. What was the main thing that you did? And I said, what? Are you kidding me? She quit. That's the main thing. I've been number two forever, and then she quit. Now, what do you mean, what did I do? I didn't talk her out of quitting. That's what I did. What do you mean? I have no illusions about that.
Well, I'd say a little hard work had something to do with it. So take me through, when did you get the call from Oprah saying, look, I want to do a show with you. I want to help you move forward for your own show, and take me through that process up until your first show.
Well, I was doing, it got to where I was doing the Oprah show every Tuesday. That was just the standing. I did sometimes not on Tuesday.
And a lot of people don't know this in our audience. They think when they see somebody on television, wow, this guy is a multi-millionaire. God, he must be making so much money doing these television appearances. Meanwhile, you do an appearance on Oprah and you get like $537.50 every time you go on.
Yeah,
but it's the impact of the audience that you go to that means it's not the money.
Of course. And I was doing it every Tuesday. And when I did it the very first show, it did get a lot of attention, and every production company in the country came out of the woodwork calling saying, you need to do your own show. You're a breath of fresh air, you're whatever, you need to do your own show. And when I would get those, I would just take them and give them to Oprah the next time I was up there and say, all this stuff came in. And she said, look, if you ever want to do your own show, just tell me, and Harpo will do it. We'll do your own show for you. If you want to do it, just tell me. And I said, okay. And I didn't say anything the first year. I didn't say anything the second year. I didn't say anything the third year. I didn't say anything the fourth year. And then one day I'd usually do 2 shows. Every time I was there, I'd do the A show and the B show. And it was between shows, and I was walking down the hall at Harpo Studios, and she sticks her head out her office door and says, hey, come in here, dummy. She said, it's time. I told you to tell me if you want to do your own show. You've never said anything. I'm telling you, it's time. All the mail, all of the downloads of transcripts and scripts, the majority of it is for when you're on. It's time. You need to do your own show. And I said, okay. So I went home, and as corny as it sounds, kind of had a Beaver Cleaver family meeting with Robin and the 2 boys, and said, here's the deal. I can go do this, but to me, this is a family decision. It's one of those things that takes 4 yeses and 1 no. If anybody doesn't want to do it, then I'm good not to do it. If everybody wants to do it, then we'll go do it.
So it had to be like a jury trial, a unanimous vote. And one person said no, it would be no. That's interesting. Is that how the family dynamic runs in the McGraw household? Whereas,
on things that affect everybody, big family decisions, yes. I mean, like when I said that, I looked around and Robin was getting boxes and packing. I mean, because she loves change. I mean, she loves change. Nobody's voted. She's getting boxes, putting shit in them and everything. And
you are so, think about you that I don't think people understand how funny you are just being around you all the time.
But, Jay was like, yeah, hell, why not? And Jordan, he was just going into high school, and, he was captain of the basketball team. He was captain of the baseball team. He had all of his friends and all of that. And he's kind of shy in some respects. And so I thought, he may go, hey, I got my life happening here, man. Pull up and leave. But he said, let's do it, man. Let's go. I said, well, what about your friends? He said, I'll make friends out there. So all 4 of them said, let's rock and roll. by the way, a funny story. That was right when Jay was getting ready to start law school, and he was trying to decide between Pepperdine and SMU. And I talked him into SMU. It was right after that we moved to LA to start doing the show. And he said, "Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, no, go to SMU. We're leaving." So he stayed on for 3 more years and finished law school at SMU. You cannot overestimate the O factor in launching a television show or a career. I mean, the fact that, that's like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval on steroids, right?
Absolutely, but I wanna, if you don't mind me going to a little bit toe to toe with you on this, okay? There's a lot of people who become successful and have successful talk shows that don't have Oprah behind them. Ellen is successful. She didn't have Oprah to launch her. There's television shows. People say HBO, the gold standard. You got to do an HBO comedy special if you're a comedian. But there's plenty of comedians who launched their career without that. Andrew Dice Clay, who's a comedian, never could get a Tonight Show, never could get a Letterman. But he did the HBO special and it launched. Everybody has their own thing. I think what I'm trying to say is, yes, never underestimate the power of Oprah. But the fact is, the power of Oprah was behind 1,000 guests. And only one person was able to break through and become successful with that power behind them, and that was you. And so I think to say that you wouldn't be successful without Oprah, I would think, and I don't know Oprah Winfrey, but I bet if she were sitting here today, she would say, "Phil, you impressed me from the moment I met you, and you were a star when I met you, and you're a star now, and I'm just fortunate enough that I was able to work with you, and the stars aligned." But I think she would say you would have been a huge success anyway. It just would have maybe taken longer and maybe a different path. But
well, maybe. And listen, I was very successful when I met Oprah, just not in television.
And you were hugely successful again building that company,
which was why it was a gutsy move, Maverick. I mean, to do that.
Well, you took a risk.
It was a gut check because I had a terrific life, and we had the #1 trial consulting firm in the world, and I was living on a beautiful golf course at the Four Seasons out in Las Colinas in Dallas, and my office was less than a mile from the house, and we had more work than we could possibly do. I mean, it was kids were thriving. Family was thriving. Everything was working well. There were a lot of reasons, if you say don't fix what ain't broke, there were a lot of reasons to not do it. But I was ready for a change. I mean, I really was. I'd done it all. I'd done, like I say, I'd lived in courtrooms all over the country. I was tired of the travel, and I'd done it all. And I was looking for something fresh and new, and this certainly was. And here we are 12 years and 2,000 shows later.
It's amazing. And so you knew, right away that things were going to be successful. They were. I have a number of unique questions for you, quick questions. I hope you don't mind. Some are more fascinating than others. Some are more entertaining. When's the last time you looked in the mirror and had a clean-shaven face?
That was at Radio City Music Hall, because for the first time in 20 years, my mustache was shaved off by Oprah on live television in front of an audience of 5,000 people.
Was that for charity or what?
I don't remember why we did it. And at the time, I was really trying to remember why the hell we were doing this. But she shaved it off, and I remember I turned around and looked at Robin, who was sitting in the front row, and she said, "No, no."
So you grew it right back.
Call makeup, glue one on, till she said, "No, it's got to come back."
Have you ever felt hopeless?
No.
Okay. Tell me something that happened in your nuclear family that you can tell me about that might be an issue or something that would have been featured on your show in 12 years.
Probably Jordan getting tattoos. Because my son Jordan is a rock musician.
And he's a great musician, and I want you to know I listened to a lot of the music and of Jordan's, and it really blew me away. And one in particular really, really affected me. I was almost uncomfortable. It was like a really phenomenal song called "The Broken." And the video starts off with a scene of domestic violence where a woman is running away from a guy throwing glass and things at this woman, and she looks in the mirror and she's all bruised and battered, and the lyrics are just incredible in the music. But I'm being honest, Phil, it was the first time I remember watching a music video where I felt uncomfortable in my stomach as it started, but then as it went on, it inspired me and it had an amazing message.
Well, they're really great, and he writes lyrics and music both.
They're called Stars for
Stars in Stereo.
Stars in Stereo.
Sins, S-I-N-S.
Yeah,
is what it goes by. But the lines in that song, it's like 1,000 lives are broken, each one hurts the same. It's getting hard to tell what's broken, the picture or the frame.
Amazing lyrics. And
yeah,
so,
really, I mean, that's pretty insightful for a kid. But tattoos, because I thought these are permanent. It's going to take,
So he didn't. So he didn't ask you.
Oh, no, he did, and we went back and forth about it because, like on our 2000 show, he was on for the first time in forever, and he's got like a mohawk and tattoos and stuff. People said that's Dr. Phil's kid. Which to him they say, that's your dad? So yeah, we debated that back and forth and negotiated a settlement at the time. So
are you allowed to say what the settlement was?
Well, my settlement at the time was, all right, you can do something, but you have to agree that it's nothing that can't be covered up by a T-shirt. Because if you change your mind later, I mean, because I don't care. It's just I don't want him later to go, oh, I'm now president of Wall Street Bank and I've got tattoos everywhere. That could be a problem. And he said, well, that's not where I'm going. And this is truly who he is, and also, but that was our negotiation at the time, and it worked out.
Great. You give a lot of advice. What's the best piece of advice someone ever gave to you that you took besides a family member, somebody on the outside of the family?
That would be from Oprah. And she said, use the media, don't let the media use you. And that was really good advice.
That's amazing advice. What's the craziest moment on your show where you got done with the show and you realized to yourself as you sat down in your dressing room, oh my God, I spent my whole life being in control, and this person pushed a button in me where I lost control on camera. And why is it that I lost control on camera?
That hasn't happened. I tell you what I regret after shows, which I often have regrets. It is seldom, if ever, something I said. It is frequently something I should have said and did not, where I sit down and afterwards and said, man, I missed a teachable moment right there, and I didn't say something. I'll give you an example if you want it.
Yes, I do.
I remember one time I had this defiant girl on. I mean, she was a teenager, defiant, disrespectful in every way. And she kept referring to her mother, brother, friends. She said like 2 or 3 times as retard. And that, to me, is very offensive. I mean, there are people that are intellectually disabled, and so they have different challenges they have to face, but that is a disrespectful word. And I got caught up in, I made a note to say something and not let that blow by me. And then I got into something else, and I'd never circled back to it. And I was really disappointed in myself for not circling back and making it very clear that that was not okay.
Got it. You're really great at sports. You do a lot of sports. You play tennis, you scuba dive. What moment in sports or what metaphor about sports do you relate to your business life of the Dr. Phil show and what you're doing and the work you're doing?
Well, I remember when I was playing football, because I played in grade school, junior high, high school, and college. And I remember coaches always saying, "Men, this teaches you about life." And I'd say, "Oh, bullshit. This teaches you about football, and I'm tired. Leave me alone." But I have to say, in retrospect, I look back at times where it's like, it seems like there's just no way out. I mean, your ass is beat. There's no way out. And the next thing you know, you've scored 3 touchdowns in a minute and 10 seconds, and you win the game because you didn't give up. I mean, I really did learn that from that the harder you work, the luckier you get, is the old saying, and I think that is really true. And I always told lawyers that I worked with at CSI that this case will be resolved. The outcome of this case will be determined before we ever walk up the courthouse stairs. You win by out-preparing the other side. You win by being honest with yourself. You win by doing what it takes. And winners do things losers don't want to do. And I've learned that.
That's right.
And I believe it. It's in my absolute DNA.
What's that Bobby Knight quote, that famous quote? Most people have the will to win. Few people have the will to prepare to win.
Exactly.
On your bucket list, tell me 3 things that you haven't accomplished yet that you want to accomplish.
Oh, wow. You should tell me about this 2 weeks in advance. Are you kidding me? One is to get through with this damn podcast. That would be one of them. One would be to take a set off of Kirk Fox in tennis. I mean, seriously, how does this guy show up looking homeless and then just beat your ass like a drum? I mean, seriously, he looks like he wakes up, dives in the laundry basket, comes out dressed, and says, "Let's go."
Now, is it kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters? He never loses?
Exactly. I mean,
I did not know that, because he tells me you're
ridiculous.
an extraordinary tennis player.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's just doing that to inflate his own ego because he beats me like a drum. I think I'm like 0-97 against him. But he is a kid. I mean, I will give myself that.
He's a kid, huh? So there isn't anything you want to do that you haven't done, really.
Well,
okay.
Nothing I can think of as I'm sitting here right now other than the ones I've given you.
What's the biggest problem you feel the world has to face as a whole? Is when you're doing the show, you're always trying to resolve these conflicts. Is there one thing that you look at that's more important than another, that dwarfs everything else, or is it just...
I do. I think I really think people sometimes are so in reactive mode. I think you absolutely, unequivocally have to resolve to star in your own life. Think about it. There is no other Barry Katz. There may be somebody with that name, but there is no other you. Thank God. Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to say it out loud. There is no other you. if you don't star in your own life, who will? Somebody else is going to star in your life? That's crazy to me. And I think people have damaged personal truths. I know that because I had a damaged personal truth. You know, growing up the way I did, my father being an alcoholic and all, I had a damaged personal truth. And that's so important because we create the results we think we deserve. And if we think we're a second-class citizen, we will generate second-class results. And I think that's true of Betty in Idaho and everybody out there. You've got to believe in your own worth and your own value and star in your own life. And I think that's critically important. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether you're a school teacher or shoveling shit in Poughkeepsie, you have to star in your own life. And I've tried to instill that in both of my boys. And with the help of Robin, who, I mean, come on, I'm married so far over my head, it isn't even funny. Those boys are starring in their own lives, and I am really proud of that. That's the legacy I want to give them.
Oh, well, you have. All right, we'll ride off in the sunset here, and I'll just ask you a few more questions, if you don't mind. Your last book was called Life Code, New Rules for Winning in the Real World. As the world changes so quickly, how do you feel the rules will change?
Well, I think they're changing as we're sitting here on this couch right now. I mean, think about it. It's really hard to take back stupid. And used to be you could get really stupid and 5 or 6 people would know about it. Now you get stupid. I can go out and do something stupid right now. People are going to be reading about it in China before I get home. I mean, the world is changing. We have to teach our kids that if they go do stupid stuff on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and then they go apply for a college admission or a job, come on, those employers, those interviewers are going to Google you. And if you're laying there with written across your forehead and 2 empty bottles of Jack Daniels on your chest, that looks different than who you're sitting in front of the interviewer. They're going to hold that against you. We have to teach our kids that the world is changing. Information exchange is happening much faster. So we've got to really be cognizant of the world we live in. It's different. It's really different. And, right now, when I grew up, we lived in neighborhoods, right? You could go down and play under the streetlight at the corner till midnight. There was no problem. But now we're a much more transient society. You have people in your lives that you don't know as much about. So you can't give people the benefit of the doubt the way you used to. I mean, the world is changing. I'm not a pessimist about it. I'm just saying prepare for it. As long as you know what's going on, you're okay.
I was saying to somebody the other day that the one thing that our children don't have is independence. Because when we were kids, like you said, oh, well, I'm leaving and I'll be back after dinner. And you were 8 years old and you're riding around the neighborhood and you felt safe. Now you can't even be in a schoolyard without looking behind you. Where's my kid? Whatever. So I think that could affect things in the future.
And my boys never rode bikes. That just wasn't part of what they did growing up. I mean, I was like sewn to my bike.
Me too.
When I was growing up, it's how you got around. It was what you did. So, but I'm the incurable optimist. I think we're going to be okay.
Tell me a holy moment that would be the highlight chapter of, a book about your life, like something that happened to you that no one would ever believe, that would blow people away. It might be an inspirational story, it might be something crazy, but something that just pulls the curtain back on your life and that somebody could never believe that this could happen to you or you would experience.
Well, it would probably be just something about me, and it is that I am very, very shy. I'm a very shy person. I mean, to me, spending an hour at a cocktail party is like the 7th gate of hell. I just am very shy. If my producers will tell you, you can do a lot of things, but what you don't want to do is leave him out there with nothing to do, because I don't like that.
I believe your executive producer, Carla Pennington, has
Carla
been with you
Pennington.
since your very first show.
Yep.
She would say the same thing.
Yeah, she'll tell you straight up. You do a lot of things, but don't leave. Turn the lights off or something. You don't want to leave them just standing out there. Seriously, if I don't care how many people are watching, if I've got something to do, I'm fine. But to just stand there with nothing to do is very uncomfortable for me. And my crew all knows that. And I got the greatest. Like as you say, Carla Pennington's been with me. We've been on for 12 years. She's been with me for 13 because she was our first hire and put the whole staff together. I've got the same 7 cameramen I had day one. I've got the supervisors, John Perry, all of these people that were with us in startup are still there today.
It all starts at the top. Tell me your biggest disappointment in business.
Wow, my biggest disappointment in business. Yeah, I don't think I've really been disappointed because I think I always find a way to evolve. If something's not working, I'm one of those people that believes if something's not working, change what you're doing until it starts working. And so I'm not one to ride things to the bottom of the canyon.
This is where I would think what you would say would be one of your biggest disappointments. Because knowing how incredibly loyal you are and how you have this family that works around you at Stage 29 Productions, I would think probably one of your biggest disappointments would be a personnel decision where somebody worked with you for a while, you tried to get them to get to the level that you felt that they could get to, but in the end the decision would have to be made to let them go. I would think that would probably be one of your biggest disappointments because you're so family oriented with this crew.
Yeah, but I think when you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences. I mean, if somebody chooses not to grow into a job or to evolve, that's their choice, not mine. And I'll tell you, when I first went into practice, I was very different. I was a young lion. I was going to save the world and stamp out disease and suffering. And if my patients didn't do well, I took it really personally, like I didn't inspire them enough. I didn't give them enough information. But yeah, I've come to learn across time, they're ultimately going to make the choices. Your kids are going to make the choices. You can raise them right, but like you say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him float on his back.
That's right.
They got to figure it out on their own in some way, and I let people do that, and I don't take that on anymore. And I did at one time, but I guess I'm too old to take that on anymore.
Well, that's okay. All right, a couple more questions. Your proudest moment.
A couple of more questions.
I promise you, only
you
two.
said goodbye 30 minutes ago.
I promise you. I promise you.
My proudest moments, I believe you're only as happy as your saddest child. And my proudest moments are when my kids are happy and doing well and thriving. And like right now, Jay has 2 beautiful children and a wonderful career and a beautiful wife. And that is I'm very proud of that. And Jordan is, he's in the top 40 right now with a grassroots band. That never happens. And he is absolutely having a ball and in his element. And I am so proud of him. And so those are my proudest moments.
All right. I promise this is the final one. So you've been in this business a long time. You've seen a lot of things. What advice do you have for not only a young executive, like the executives that you started with who've been with you for years, and how to move up the chain and the ladder in that world in your production company, because you are an executive producer and you do run the production company, but also what advice to give to young people who are out there who might be homeless or might be living in a place that's unsafe or whatever, but they have a dream. They want to get to a certain place in their life to where hopefully they could be one of 1,000 people that could be chosen out of an Oprah show or start their own company. What is it that you feel they can do to get out from where they are and get to the next level?
You've got to get in the game at whatever level. I don't care if you're a runner at a studio or for a show, or you're an AP or a PA or whatever, get in the game. I mean, when it comes to this industry, there's New York, LA, and everywhere else. And if you're going to make it in this arena, you got to get in the arena. You've got to get in the game. And I believe that value added is rewarded. And if you get somewhere and start adding value, it's going to be rewarded. But you got to get in the game. You got to get where it's happening at some level. This is like you're saving yourself for management or a leading role. Bullshit. Get in the game somehow, somewhere. Get your cards on the table and start playing. Now, when do I get to ask you questions?
Well, you can if you want.
How do you get people to do this shit? How do you get people to come sit here and have you dissect their psyche and their soul? I mean, how do you get people to do this? How did you get me to do this? Is this some kind of mind control that you have? Am I going to walk out of here in a trance? I was at the dentist yesterday. They implant something in my head. Was that part of the deal?
I thought it was amazing. You were at the dentist yesterday, and you were texting me and emailing me like you were like you physically would come over here. I was like, what is he doing? How could he possibly think he could come over here?
I don't tell people I'm going to do something and then not do it. That's just bullshit. I hate that.
Well, now you'll tell everybody not to do this now.
It killed me that I couldn't get here yesterday.
And now it killed you that you got here.
But I couldn't come. I mean, honestly, I look like a fucking hillbilly. I had a tooth gone right here, and I thought, well, it's probably just radio, because I've never done a podcast before.
I know, and most everybody that I do is their first podcast, and after they do mine, it's probably their last.
Well, that's a good thing. You do two at once. You're first and you're last.